And if reversing it, going back to the alternative politics I spoke about, means bringing everybody together in a national unity government of sorts that is focused primarily on development, rather than this exclusionary politics that we're playing.
State Affairs with Nnodim is live. State Affairs with Nnodim is live. Stay tuned.
Hello. It's another good thinking time. It's another time for deep reflections on politics, history, and power. It is another time to look at the Nigeria-Biafra war. This time, we talk about the lingering questions. This time, the specific is the Igbo perspective. It is the story of a book and the writer. When the writer sets out to write a book, the writer is on a mission. This writer has accomplished a mission. In the mission are questions to be answered. And this writer will answer the questions. Welcome to the side of time. I'm holding a book. The title of the book is Toward Understanding the Nigeria-Biafra War and Lingering Questions, an Igbo Perspective. You see, the book provokes thoughts of the war. It looks at the British engagement with the peoples of the Lower River Basin that resulted in the fabrication of a Nigerian state under insincere and contrived premises. You see, is that the Igbo perspective? This author makes the point that his book challenges the Nigerian state because there is the fabrication of a state under insincere and contrived premises. Now, this author makes the point that the ethnic groups in Nigeria share nothing that one can cherish. And Nigeria has never managed to find a commonality of purpose or civic principle. And he says no small thanks to colonial policies predicated on divide and rule. As a result, the ingenious political class was bequeathed a toxic legacy of inter-ethnic suspicion, incoherence, and disharmony. And this happened at independence in 1960. It is the story of the war. It is the story of diplomacy. It is a reminder of where we are coming from. My guest on this edition of State Affairs is Professor Joseph Nnodim. Professor Nnodim is the author of the book Toward Understanding the Nigeria-Biafra War and Lingering Questions, an Igbo Perspective. The title of the book, Towards Understanding the Nigeria-Biafra War and the Lingering Questions, an Igbo Perspective. What informed the title?
The title was informed by the experience over time, trying to make sense of what exactly happened at a very impressionable stage of my life. I was only 13 when the hostilities broke out, and I never really could fully comprehend what was going on. But then the enormity of it, the horrors were so very obvious and impactful. They remained with me, and as time went on, I tried. It was a struggle to make sense of them. I did some reading around it, and the information I was getting wasn't terribly satisfactory. And as I got older, I got married, I had children of my own, and they were very inquisitive. They were asking to know what exactly happened as children do, what happened in my childhood, and what experiences I had growing up. Inevitably, the experience of the war would come up, and then there are questions I'll try my best to answer, and often not answering them satisfactorily to myself or to them. So that was inspiration. That was inspiration for trying to put things down in writing. And then, and as I did that, I was compelled to do a lot more reading. And it was just not very satisfactory what I was finding. So I had to explore as deeply as I could. Fortunately, the conditions were very limiting. It was during the pandemic. I had hoped I was going to be able to see source materials at the British Library, but then that didn't happen. But I did the best I could, and librarians were very helpful here. So I thought my understanding improved, and I decided it was best to share it. And it was more like a journey. So we're going towards understanding it. And as more information becomes more available, we'll get to know more and more about what happened, what really was very terrible that happened in that part of the world. And it did raise questions. It didn't answer. Many would say it was very futile, very futile. It did raise more questions than it tried to answer. And I had to take an Igbo perspective because, as happens during war, they say to the victor the spoils, and the victor tends to write history. Many accounts have been written, quite a number of fine accounts have been written, but not nearly as many as one would want to see. Also, I wanted to make a contribution looking at things from the viewpoint of the Biafran side, and more specifically, the Igbo perspective.
You said here, how come the Igbo, arguably one of the most resourceful ethnic groups in the world, succumbed to so tragic a fate? Have you been able to answer that question?
Not completely. It is just I explored it some. I can't say I answered that question, but then there were insights. Definitely the Igbo, without a doubt, extremely resourceful people. But our understanding of politics as it is practiced today is not optimal, put it mildly. We didn't quite understand our circumstances and the text, who exactly we were up against. We didn't quite show the kind of flexibility required in a situation like the one we found ourselves, and our final outcome was calamitous as it was. We, at a critical time, certain poor judgments were made by the leadership, and the followership did not quite exert the kind of control over the leadership as one would expect. So they got away with many mistakes that led to a very, very sad outcome.
You also make the point that you wrote from the perspective of a harassed and harried. Harassed? How?
Yeah, yes, indeed. We're harassed and harried. Usually, the stories about war are written by people who prevailed, the side that prevailed, the side that was traumatized and beaten up badly. They are too busy picking on the pieces of their lives to worry about putting things down on paper. That was the case. So I had to see it from that perspective of someone who had been as we were. We were very, very badly blooded, and there's no escaping that. And the enormity of it, the full scale of it, needed to be portrayed.
But at the end of the war, the Nigerian government said there was no victor and no vanquished. You disputed that.
I certainly did. That was a nice thing to say, but it was so bull. It didn't make sense. It was. I mean, I've even read several accounts in which many people writing from the perspective of the Nigerian side freely admitted that just the nice things to say. That definitely there was a victor and there was a vanquished, and then the vanquished will have to be made to face the consequences of what happened. And in real life, that's been the case. That's been the case. The marginalization, there have been deprivations. Quite clearly, if not for the fact that the losing side is as energetic, as imaginative, as resourceful as it naturally is, it would have been an unending catastrophe, a catastrophe that had acquired a life of its own and lived on. But then they managed to reduce these structural impediments that were placed on their way to mere minor obstacles which they crossed and went ahead. No, that's just it's almost I wouldn't say silly, but then it just sounded nice. Definitely there was a victor, and it behaved like victors did, and there was a vanquished, and they were treated like vanquished people were treated.
I have heard this talk about marginalization of the Igbo people. Who is marginalizing them?
The rest of the country is constituted authorities. Quite clearly, you can see it in appointments made, in cases where things have to be portioned. The sharing is made in such a way as to leave at best crumbs for them to scramble to pick up. It's I doubt it's anything anybody can quibble or quarrel about. It definitely is happening, and many people experience it. We know in the armed forces for a very, very, very long time. No Igbo officers could be promoted to flag rank. As soon as they got to colonel, they were retired, or for some reason something happens. They just don't get there. Always they keep them at the free of things. It's not anything anybody has doubts about. It's a real life experience for many people, almost on a day-to-day basis.
In the preface of your book, you said traditional Igbo society is overwhelmingly Republican and egalitarian, with important decision-making pursued through a process of direct democracy. Is this a disadvantage for the Igbos in Nigeria?
Yes and no. Yes and no. It is a very, very highly evolved way of life, in the sense that every individual who is of age and has a thing to say, has the opportunity to say it, and is listened to. The highly developed societies is an aspiration of the highly developed societies of the world today. That level of republicanism which came to us naturally. But then again, you find it creates problems in leadership. It's a package. It's a package, but certain elements of which are missing. For instance, we favor a different kind of leadership than is widely understood. We don't have we don't do well with arrangements whereby just one person emerges and says he's leader and tells everybody else what to do. We don't do well in that kind of a setting. It's a more collegial, collaborative kind of arrangement that works with us. But then when the situation is right and some kind of leader appears, we'll keep him on a leash. We want to be able to keep an eye on what he's doing. We track him very closely. And if he does not do well, we always want to have the opportunity to punish him or her. We'll have a certain iconoclasm about us. If you do well, we put you on a pedestal. We praise you. We're fascinated with success. We celebrate success. But then if you fail and fail badly and hurt people, we want to be able to punish you. But in the present day context, coming to your question, the present is a disadvantage to us because that opportunity for iconoclasm does not exist. People do badly in public office. They embezzle money, they mistreat people, they don't do what they're supposed to do. And they're immune. Now, you'll say, okay, well, we'll give them 4 years. After 4 years, then we'll get our hands on them. But after 4 years, for instance, after 4 years as governor, if he migrates to another office, he becomes a senator, for instance, and maintains his immunity. He remains insulated from the consequences of his bad judgments and actions in the previous position he has. So that we can't punish him as we would traditionally do. We can't say, well, you did badly in this office, so we're going to punish you. So that Igbo worldview, that Igbo approach to governance is missing that dimension, and I would find very frustrating. That's why you'll find many people, very many concerned people, never really want to get into public office.
So can we still say that the Igbo society is egalitarian?
Fundamentally, yes. You can still say your piece. Whether or not it matters, whether or not to change things is another question. But in a traditional setting, people can still say what they feel like saying, and that in itself is very valuable. Egalitarian in the sense, in fact, in spite of the fact that the landscape is relatively flat, there are asymmetries. There are subordinate and subordinate actors. People do well. Talented people who exploit their talents and do well, get terribly rich, or whatever it is. We recognize that. But even then, there's a certain level at which things are fairly equal, at least to the extent that everybody gets to see their own bit. If you have a viewpoint, it's tolerated, you can say it, and you'll be listened to.
State Affairs with Nnodim is live. State Affairs with Nnodim is live. Stay tuned. State Affairs with Nnodim is live.
Joseph Nnodim has written a book on the Nigeria-Biafra war. But Ojukwu, Gowon, or Murtala Muhammad did not leave a document behind. They did not tell the story of the war. Do you know why?
Difficult to say, and it's surprising why they are so historical. General Ojukwu himself was a student of history. He kept saying he was going to explain certain things, but then unfortunately he died and left nothing in that regard. Gowon, I wonder. Gowon has written nothing. He's still alive, and I hold him responsible for much. I hope before he passes on, he does to redeem himself. General Muhammad, he came into the scene in January 29th. He led that coup. And collectively, he and others who were principal characters in that terrible event swore, according to Max Yolo, who's another respected historian, that they wouldn't tell anybody anything they did on that day. They weren't going to disclose exactly what they did on that day. They weren't going to put down in writing or other means or in any other fashion what they did. So take ownership for what they did on that day or on those days. So, which is sad. It's usually very good to hear principal actors give first-hand accounts, but in this case, that's been denied to us.
You know, you took your time to write about Ojukwu constituting a 335-member consultative assembly before the war was declared. And it was that assembly that voted that Ojukwu should declare the state of Biafra. But you also make the point that it was wrong timing and miscalculation that led to the debacle of the Nigeria-Biafra war. Why are you taking that position?
I've taken that position because of the outcome. You might say that's with the wisdom of hindsight, but it's very important. These are people, very highly educated people who knew in a historical context and other contexts what the implications were of declaring sovereignty, breaking away from an entity like Nigeria, which is the darling of a country like Britain. Britain was weakening since the Second World War. Was weakening, but it was still a powerful country, a very influential country. So its interests couldn't be trifled with, and Nigeria was one of them. They should have known that Britain wouldn't take kindly to that kind of a move, and they were going to challenge it in all sorts of ways. They went ahead and did it. That was my problem. We had been brutalized beyond all reason. You know, the East had been treated very, very terribly, and there was no basis for continuing the kind of relationship that existed before 1966. But a severance of that kind, the declaration of succession, had implications. Nigeria and her mentors were going to react to it, and it wasn't clear that we're ready for the reactions.
When Gowon wrote a letter to Ojukwu on the 26th of May, 1967, informing him of the federal government's plan to partition Nigeria into 12 states, was that not enough to cause the reaction that followed?
It was very provocative. It was very, very provocative, no question about it. But not succession. My argument has always been, at that point in time, Lagos had practically no influence over whatever was happening in the East. That set up its institutions, and in spite of all the difficulties, we were doing the best it could to manage the huge number of people that had come in, and we had the moral high ground. We could speak, we could get people out to tell people all over the world what was happening, and they'd listen to us and they'd help us. But then the moment you throw in succession, you raise all sorts of questions. Africa itself, for instance, when I went to Senegal, so threw up his hands and said he just couldn't. If he were to support Biafra openly, he have to contend with separatist movements in his own country himself. And it was all over the continent. All over the continent. It was a hodgepodge of these funny creations, things, the lines they drew on him up in 1884 in Berlin, with no rhyme or reason in terms of ethnic affinities and affiliations. So you couldn't make a good enough case. People were very, very, very reluctant to go the extra mile when it was a matter of succession. But if we had stayed on our own, pretty much like South Sudan had done, not declaring succession, but just keeping just by itself and say, well, Lagos, do whatever you like. It would have been more rewarding that way than throwing in this bugbear of succession, and that in itself became a diversion. All sorts of arguments arose, whether they were going to be, the legality of it, and all sorts of the involved balkanization of the continent, and all questions of that kind. So that was my main point. The provocation was there, but then the reaction to that provocation was, I'd say, a bit one step excessive, too excessive.
Some analysts have accused Ojukwu of leading Igbos to war. If you look at page 114 of your book, you write that on May 26, 1967, the military governor convened the Consultative Assembly, and after a lengthy oration describing the trials and tribulations on the journey thus far, he asked which of three courses of action was the best suited to the road ahead, namely, accept Gowon and the terms dictated by the North, continue the stalemate and drift, or assert our autonomy to ensure our survival. The Consultative Assembly voted for the Republic of Biafra. In this case, was it Ojukwu that led the Igbos to war, or the Consultative Assembly?
Ojukwu did not lead the Igbos to war. The Consultative Assembly was at fault here. These are people who are, it was not about people. Lots of them were smarter than the governor himself. They could have told him that those three were not, the list of 3 options was not exhaustive. There were other options. That is my thinking. These were not the only 3 lines of action open to us. So confining themselves to just those 3 and then voting for that, the third one, which was declaring sovereignty, is coming for some blame from my own judgment. And it wasn't very sincere of the governor to put it that way. It wasn't very sincere, but then they should have called him they should have checked him. They could have told him that there were other options.
But remember, at this time, the Igbos were already bruised. The pogrom had taken a toll on their emotions. And to many at that point in time, the only option was to die. And if going to war was death, so be it.
I agree. Tempers were very, very inflamed. And like I say, we had a moral high ground. We had been treated very, very, very badly. But then it was a responsibility of leadership to keep things in proper perspective. It was a responsibility to, there should have been cool heads that should have kept things rational, despite the difficulties, and then handled them properly. It would have been extremely difficult, but that's a challenge of leadership. That's a challenge of leadership. And we had people, you see, my problem is that the politics of the time required minds like Michael Okpara, Dr. Michael Okpara, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, Dr. Nwafọ Orizu, Dr. Matthew Mbu, Chief Matthew Mbu, people of that kind, people see politicians to come forward from the much maligned First Republic, if you like. But then they were still around on the other side. Why couldn't we use them? Why couldn't we use them? That was a big question I asked, and I haven't gotten a satisfactory answer. These were people who could have handled these questions, try to cool tempers down, and get things in a way that would have led us to a less inflammatory outcome.
Gowon had petitioned Nigeria on the 27th of May, 1967. And you said clearly the main, if not sole purpose of the state creation exercise was to stoke division in the East and undermine its cohesion by pandering to the strong minority activists and powerful federal permanent secretaries who had him by the short hairs. Was that not a good strategy for the federal government?
It was a good strategy, but then towards what? Aimed at what? Making the country a better place for everybody, or what? So it was effective because definitely there was a strong lobby going back a very long time. Remember, even before independence, we had a willing commission which met, and even then the willing commission discouraged Professor Willing discouraged the creation of states, and they didn't think it was going to solve the problem of marginalization and distributive injustice. He had other ideas, but then many people felt that statehood was the answer to their problems, and the West especially wasn't going to forget that the East championed the creation of the Midwest out of the West. So they were very strongly in favor, and the people in the sea the Calabar, Ogoja, and the Rivers were very, very influential and making very loud noises in Lagos. So they played very nicely into the hands of Konogowan. It was clearly very mischievous of him. He knew what he was doing. It was you couldn't bring up such an inflammatory subject, which have been discredited. Discredited. Creating states by fiat. You didn't do that. And in the circumstances, it was totally inappropriate. 30,000 people have been killed. 1.6 million have been internally displaced. And you were throwing in this structural reconfiguration of the country that was going to upset everything. So that one has a lot to answer for. That was very, very, very disruptive. And it created the situation that inflamed everything. Where people got very upset and matters got out of hand.
I've been thinking, he created 3 states from the old Eastern region. And he created the East Central for the Igbos. And the East Central was landlocked. What was he thinking?
It was deliberate. He wanted to make sure they had no access to any other neighboring country or the sea. It was very, very careful calculation on his part or on their part, not just Gawan. They were very mischievous people around him, and it was just a mouthpiece. They did that. The West was intact. The Midwest was intact. The North was split into 6 states, but then there was a Council of Northern States. So the whole idea of state creation was just to fragment the East and break up its undermine its solidarity and make the Igbo as uncomfortable as possible.
So can we say that the federal government was more strategic in this sense?
Yeah, the question is strategic to what end? I mean, what were they aspiring to? What were they aspiring to? Are you aspiring to a peaceful outcome, or you want to create problems that will never go away? Which is practically what they've done. Which is practically what has happened. The Willing Commission is going to set up a Fisiparos as a language, a Fisiparos dynamic of endless requests for states. We started with 12. Now we have how many? 36. And the demand is ongoing. So it basically is that, and it still solves no problems. It doesn't solve. The people will still complain. So that is just not the point. It's a mistake they've made, and the objective was simply to fragment East. That was the whole point of that exercise.
State Affairs with Nnodim is live. State Affairs with Nnodim is live.
You know, you reminded us of the story of Isaac Adakaboro and the 12-day revolution. When they declared the Niger Delta Republic on the 23rd of February 1966, Igbo did not see Biafra coming because the 1st Battalion, Enugu, and John Obienu, a major, was among those who crushed the revolution. How come Igbo did not see Biafra coming at this point?
In February 1966, this was after between the coups.
Yes.
Yeah, there was the problems had been in the West. The West had, in fact, in the lead up to the coup, what actually triggered the coup was the collapse of civilization in the West. People were dousing one another with gasoline and setting themselves aflame, and law and order had broken down there. And then there was this coup.
Was
in
that
February? Adakaboro attacked a police station in Yenagoa, and then started his Niger Delta Republic thing. Actually, it's a police action, the police force. John Obienu just came to support the police. In 12 days, they arrested him and put paid to that effort. There was no problem. Biafra wasn't even. There was no such thing. Nobody was thinking in those terms at the time.
But remember,
trying to recover from the January coup.
Was the January coup an Igbo coup?
It certainly wasn't. It was still an Igbo coup. It wasn't. It couldn't be an Igbo coup because if it was an Igbo coup, it would have succeeded. I say that because all the fighting formations of the Nigerian army, that on the 14th of January 1966 were commanded by Igbo officers. 1st Battalion, who was it was their job, but their job was in Lagos. And who was there was Major Kumweze. 2nd Battalion, Ikeja, was Colonel in Joko. That one had arrived that day from London, but Hillary handed over to him. 3rd Battalion was the commander was George Kurubo, Colonel George Kurubo. Kurubo was in Lagos. His 2IC was Israel Okoro. 4th Battalion was Abogo Lagama. But he was away. He had gone to Lagos. He had first gone to Kaduna to see Ahmadu Bello with Akintola, then went to Lagos. His 2IC was in Zefili. Amakal in Zefili. The QMG, the Master General, was Igbo. Unebe. Out Unebe. Commander Federal Guards was Igbo. And in the end, when things happened, the general officer commanding himself, led the effort to frustrate and put paid to the coup. So it certainly was not an Igbo coup, and there were lots of officers who are not Igbo. The Moyega, Olufmilayo, Swanton, Atonkwera, lots of officers who are not Igbo, participated in the coup. It's just mischievous, very, very mischievous. And what were they aiming at? The idea was to remove the NNA government and set up one with Chief Obafemi Awolowo as the executive head. And immediately the coup fizzled. Nobody that disappeared from the narrative. It's a very, very mischievous construal of events that it was an Igbo coup. It certainly was not an Igbo coup. If it was an Igbo coup, it would have succeeded.
Did he not succeed? An Igbo man took over. Aguiyi Ironsi.
He did not succeed. Ironsi did not plan, or he did not plan the coup. He really did not. He was a reluctant player in all of this. He was not part of. He was not party to what was going on. He didn't know what was going on. It just happened that there was an army insurrection, and he was head of the armed forces. And senior officers then told him he had the civilians had to hand over to the military. It has succeeded in the north. It has succeeded in the north, in the 4th Brigade area of operations. But down south, the 2nd Brigade area, it didn't. It didn't. It had been thwarted. And the amount of discussions they had, when Ironsi went to New Jersey, Ironsi went to Ikeja cantonment, 2 expatriate police officers came and fetched him. They went by helicopter to Land Building, where they met the Minister of State for Defense, for the Army, who tried to give him an order to put down the coup. Well, he told them, because there had been this discussion in the 64 elections, how such orders should be written and given. The only person in the country who had the authority to order troops, the use of troops, was the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister was missing. So they tried to get the team president, Dr. Rizu, to appoint Alhaji Dipcharima, the most senior NNA minister, acting prime minister. But unfortunately, the contingent that went to see him were just the NNA. They did not take along, because it was a coalition government with NNA and the OPGA. They did not take along any OPGA ministers. So the acting president refused to do that. So there was a stalemate. Senior officers met and asked the GOC to demand that they relinquish power to the armed forces, which they did on the 16th. So he very reluctantly accepted it. He did it on behalf of the armed forces. The senior officer called and asked him to act along those lines. He did not do it because he was an Igbo officer who led a coup. So that ethnic coloration they try to put on that coup is extremely, extremely dangerous and mischievous, and created lots and lots of problems.
Yes, my plan was to discuss the January coup and the counter coup in another interview with you, but at least we are talking about it. And you've raised a fundamental point about Awolowo. That Awolowo was supposed to be the main beneficiary of that coup. Let me take you through some lines in Adewale Ademoyega's book, Why We Struck. He makes a point on page 47 here. He said, unlike those military leaders who cashed in on our revolution and ruled the people carelessly and without direction, we would certainly have created a mass political movement which would lead and vigilantly guide the nation along the path of pure democratic socialism. This would have meant that the army would see itself not as an army of occupation which indulged itself in political reaction, revisionism, and economic robbery. That is one point. If you turn to page 85 or 84 of the book, Adewale Ademoyega says, the wicked propaganda that followed the coup was only made possible by the weakness and non-revolutionary principles of the Ironsi regime, which bore no semblance to the well-ordered and well-controlled government that was envisaged and could have been run by us if our plans were fully executed, and would have been run by us if our plans were fully executed. Awolowo did not come in here. What do you think?
Well, this is all conjecture. It never happened. And it's difficult for me to say. It's all, quite frankly, my inclination is that it might have been all fanciful up to a certain point. It never really works out that way. Whether or not the coup plotters took into account the sheer complexity of the country is questionable. I don't know. That's the much I can say. I'm not terribly optimistic that the outcome would have been particularly different. The thing is, what had happened was that there was an they did not succeed. There was an unfortunate imbalance and casualties in the coup, and that inflamed certain passions that led to what happened thereafter. And it was easy to manipulate those events the way very dangerous people did. As to what the major was saying, I think it's all conjecture.
On page 116 of your book, you make the point, arguably, Gowon was spoiling for a fight, having at the time begun to mend fences with Chief Awolowo, thus enabling the North and the West to close ranks behind him. What do you think about Awolowo's role in that war?
Very sad, very, very, very sad. Sad and disappointing. But unfortunately, he must have thought he was doing his best for his constituency, whatever that was. In matters of this kind, I believe the responsibility belongs to the individual to take care of their own best interests. I also believe he thought whatever he was doing was in his own best interest. And it was the responsibility of Biafra or the Easterners to do things in their own best interest. But then clearly there are certain metrics by which we judge things. There are certain parameters that's going beyond your question now. Things that happened much later and utterances that were made and policies that were put in place and implemented that resulted in the death of over 1 million children. That in itself is a crime against humanity. Whatever he did, that aspect of his performance during that period is something totally regrettable, very woeful, and really something really to be ashamed of.
Are you talking about starvation as an instrument of war?
Precisely.
Let's look at the role oil played in this war. Do you believe that Ojukwu saw oil in the Delta and felt that Biafra with oil would stand its ground? Was oil behind the reason Ojukwu declared Biafra?
I don't think so. I don't think so, because overtures had been made to him, and he refused. At least on one account, the Soviet Union had wanted him to nationalize Western oil interests, pay. He said he couldn't do that because he didn't have money to pay compensation for nationalized interests. I don't think that was overriding reason why things went the way they did. Clearly, oil and mineral resources were a consideration for both sides. I mean, Nigeria cannot. Federal Nigeria cannot deny the fact that they wouldn't have been as murderous as they have been if it wasn't for the oil. If you're some patch of eastern Nigeria or some part of desert, we certainly couldn't have had the fighting go on. I don't think the concern was for the oil as such. There were lots of other issues in the mix. Clearly, you can't dismiss the outrage over the slaughter of 30,000 people, the displacement of 1.6 million people, loss of property, the humiliation, and all that. Those definitely were important considerations to, in my mind, cause a re-examination of the continued relationship between the East and the rest of the country.
Some would think that Ojukwu should have considered the offer made by the Soviet Union, at least to get the support of the Soviet Union.
Yeah, I think too. But it's not exactly left-leaning, quite frankly. I mean, Ojukwu, his father, Sir Louis, was the wealthiest West African, at least, if not the wealthiest African. It's not exactly left-leaning. And one might say it was that treatment, that rebuff, that angered people like Major Philip Alale, who was a very, very strong leftist. He didn't like the way the Soviet Union was given a cold shoulder when they approached Biafra. Yeah, certainly Ojukwu was, General Ojukwu was Western inclined, which in a sense is a shame because the West didn't care that much for what was going on, from its own standpoint.
I want to read from your book because this is quite detailed. You said in June 1967, the government of Biafra asked Shell BP to pay the due oil royalties in the amount of 7 million British pounds. Shell BP pleaded force majeure and offered to pay only 0.25 million pounds. In the event, the British government intervened and reportedly blocked the remittance of even that token amount to Biafra. At this point, Ojukwu should have known. Don't you think so?
Yeah. What could he do? What could he do? Well, he managed to get some money out of Shell BP, but that's a different story. But what could he do? There was a problem in the West at the time. For us in the East, what I call counterpart awareness, they wasn't as comprehensive as it was. We didn't get a full sense of the fact that Britain was going in totally in support of federal Nigeria. We didn't know that Britain we didn't appreciate that they were a full partner. They were going to do everything that they needed to do, in spite of the fact that even the Soviet Union was contributing to the federal war effort. Britain was going to remain both feet planted in Lagos as well. We did not understand that. We just did not understand and take that into account.
Why did Biafra not understand?
It's difficult. It's difficult to say why. It's difficult to say why. Probably they did, and then probably they did to a certain extent, but while you understand, you say you understand, and what are you going to do about it? The options of what to do were very, very few. With the very sad thing was that we just could not cultivate a strong enough patron-client relationship with a major power, one on the Security Council of the United Nations. And you needed that very badly for any major enterprise of the kind we were embarked on. You needed that kind of a relationship. You needed that kind of a mentor. And we never did. We found favor with France, maybe Portugal. But then that wasn't enough. And most of these countries, there was a lot of ferment at the time. There was a lot of political unrest, cultural unrest. Students were literally up in arms in France at the time. The government was very, very distracted. At one point, Charles de Gaulle had to flee to West Germany for a bit. In the United States, they were totally immersed in Indochina. And it was too much of a problem there for them to give us any attention. So it's a question of, you understand what are your options? What are your options? And Britain, there's a big boys club. It's a big boys club. I say, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. They talk to one another, and then they say to themselves, well, what exactly are these chaps up to? So it's kind of unfortunate.
State Affairs with Nnodim is live.
The program is State Affairs, and we are streaming the interview with Professor Joseph Nnodim. At some point in that interview, we made reference to Yakubu Gowon not writing an autobiography giving detailed account of the war. At the time we recorded this interview, Gowon had not released his autobiography. So we recorded this interview in April this year. But Gowon has told his story. Are you reading Yakubu Gowon's story? My guest on tonight's edition of State Affairs is Joseph Nnodim, the author of the book Towards Understanding the Nigeria-Biafra War and Lingering Questions, an Igbo Perspective. If you read the book, you will think that Nnodim is a professor of political science. Anyway, a professor is a professor. All the professor needs is to pay attention to the subject he or she is interested in. And Nnodim is interested in the Nigeria-Biafra War. My guest has an inspiring career of physician-scientist whose work spans continents and disciplines. From the classrooms of Nigeria to the cutting-edge research labs of the University of Michigan, our guest has dedicated his life to understanding the human body and improving the lives of older adults. We are talking about Dr. Joseph Nnodim, a man who is not only a clinical associate professor of geriatrics medicine, but also an expert in cell biology, a leader in medical education, and a pioneer in the study of how we work and maintain our balance as we age. Nnodim's story begins in Nigeria, where he earned his medical degree from the University of Lagos in 1978. He didn't stop there. He developed deep interest in the fundamental building blocks of life, pursuing a PhD in cell biology from the University of Wales in the United Kingdom. This combination, a clinician's understanding of the whole patient and a scientist's grasp of the microscopic, would become the hallmark of his career. Our guest is Joseph Nnodim. The discussion continues, but before then, do you have any intervention to make? Do you have any intervention to make? If you are a regular listener of this program, you already know our number. But if you are not, the number is not scrolling on the screen tonight, but I can spell it out. So it is 080 18449. That's the number to call. If you want to join this discourse, you have listened to Professor Nnodim. What do you have to say? Do you have any intervention to make? So the WhatsApp number to call is 080 999 18449. Your intervention comes as Nnodim breaks down the content of his book entitled Towards Understanding the Nigeria-Biafra War and Lingering Questions, an Igbo Perspective. Okay, we have a call here. So let this call. Good. Hello. Hello. Hello.
Okay, we have a call here.
Hello, Mazio Bilo. Good evening from here.
Thank you for joining the program. Have you been listening to the interview?
Yes.
So,
Actually listening to the interview. But my contribution today will go in my worriness about us not learning from the history. Actually, when you look down on what is happening on IPOB movement today, it's largely based on emotion. And we need to be able to, it's quite unfortunate we have not been able to set emotion aside and look into the practical.
you are taking us away from the subject. We are listening to this interview. We want interventions on this interview. We are not discussing IPOB tonight. Tonight we are discussing towards understanding the Nigeria-Biafra war. So that was why I asked, are you listening to the interview? Do you have any intervention to make?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for joining the discourse. Let's restrict ourselves to the issues of the war. We have a guest on the show, Professor Joseph Nnodim. He has made some points. We've talked about the January coup. We've mentioned the counter coup. All right, let's take this call. Hello.
Yes. Good evening from my location.
Good evening.
Yes, Mazi, but I'm getting a feedback. I don't know.
Just make your
Hello,
point.
Mazi, am I coming out clear?
You are coming out very clear.
Okay, so let me go ahead. Thank you for the program. I listened to the interview with Professor Nnodim that you played. But I wanted to maybe, if he's listening, because he said he's our guest for the evening. But since he is around, I would like to put the question to him, perhaps.
Okay, he's not around. He's not around here. It's a recorded interview. I made the point that we recorded the interview in April. I made that point.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. So since he's not around, but let me still put the questions across. Maybe perhaps you can attempt to look at them, or whenever you have the opportunity, you can make the intervention. So the first thing I want to ask is this: in his own submission in that interview, he made the point that the conclusion which General Ojukwu reached together with the Constituent Assembly in their own determination, where they felt that the best option to the best course of action, or which was the best desired option, was the declaration of Biafran independence. He said that conclusion was not the best option that was available. According to him, there could have been another way. So, first of all, I would have loved him to say which way would he have preferred under the circumstances, and that in his own estimation would have been a better choice, given the current realities of that time? That's the first question, right? And then the other thing I also want to also ask is, because he also submitted that he mentioned a few names, like I think Dr. Michael Opara, Nnamdi Azikiwe, and a few other names. He said those ones may have been better placed to handle the political complexity, okay, that preceded the war. So in his own estimation, those ones would have been been in position to make better judgment. But my question is, was it not those same people, the likes of Azikiwe and the other politicians from the East, were they not all also part of the Nigerian state that eventually failed, that led to Kaduna Revolve and co engaging in that coup in the first place? I don't know if you get my point. So how is it then that the same political class who obviously failed in their politicking business led to the coup by those military officers? How could those same people have been better placed to solve the same problem that they created and failed to solve in the first place?
All right,
That
thank
is the
you.
second
Thank you.
point I would
No,
like to raise.
thank you. Thank you. Okay. If you want to make this call and you want your voice to be sharp, don't use hands-free. Just speak into your phone. You will love the sound quality. And please restrict yourself to 3 minutes. Restrict yourself to 3 minutes. Because we are running an interview, so I won't give you all the time to talk. The Nnodim interview is not over. We will play the next part after this interaction. From what you have listened to so far, what do you think? The last caller asked some fundamental questions. I know Professor Nnodim is listening. So, Prof, you can take down the questions. And if you choose to answer, you can call our usual number, and I'll put you on to respond to the questions. That is if it is convenient, because that wasn't planned. So Nnodim has told us why he wrote his book. He has told us why he chose the Igbo perspective. And I asked, how did the Igbos find themselves in that position that led to the Civil War? He has made the point that in the war, there was a victor and there was a vanquished. He has talked about the marginalization of Igbo. And we delved into the political and social character of the Igbo, the egalitarian nature of the Igbo, the acephalous nature of the Igbo, the republican character of the Igbo. And within the Nigerian context, we asked, is that republican character in sync with the dominant conservatism that governs? We've talked about the Igbo Consultative Assembly. The letter Gowon wrote to Ojukwu informing him of the creation of new states from the eastern region. We've mentioned Adakaboro in this interview. We've talked about the January 1966 coup. Professor Nnodim says it is not an Igbo coup. If you want to join the discourse, the number to call is 080-999-18449. That is the number to call. WhatsApp call. Restrict your call to 3 minutes. At most 4. If you don't, I will just fade you out. Or we can also choose to listen. The title of Nnodim's book is Towards Understanding the Nigeria-Biafra War and Lingering Questions, an Igbo Perspective. That's the author, that's the title of the book, authored by Joseph Nnodim. Let's continue the interview.
State Affairs with Nnodim is live.
You see, I've read this part of your book again and again, and I keep thinking, let me read it to the audience to understand what happened, because your book is so detailed that I admire the book dearly. You said here, there had been some cordiality between the civilian government of Dr. Michael Okpara and the Soviet Union before the crisis. Contracts for the construction of the University of Nigeria Teaching Hospital, Enugu, had been awarded to mostly Soviet companies. In April 1967, an unnamed top Soviet diplomat visited Enugu and had audience with the military governor. He then met with General Njoku to share his impressions of the governor and his advisors regarding their preparedness for the challenge ahead. He described them as ill-suited and ill-prepared. He presented the general with some books and a movie on counterinsurgency. Shortly afterward, the teaching hospital contracts were cancelled. The Soviet Union was later to throw in their lot with Federal Nigeria as strange bedfellows with Britain. It has also been suggested that another reason for shunning the Soviet Union was the confidence of the Biafran leadership at the time that there would be no sustained conflict, and so no need to mortgage the future of the new nation in any way. You know, what was Ojukwu thinking here? I'm still wondering that there would be no sustained conflict, and so no need to mortgage the future of the new nation in any way. Who was advising Ojukwu?
He had some very good advisors. But probably not enough of them. And they probably didn't provide sufficient diversity of opinion. On economics, somebody like Pius Ikibo, who was world class. Dr. Pius Ikibo was world class. But then it's kind of, Western economy. It's Western economy. These weren't socialists. They didn't know. They had very little sympathy for, or little understanding or sympathy for how things happened in socialist countries. I think that was it. They didn't want to talk too much to communist and socialist countries. They wanted to keep sympathies with the West, and that in itself had its problems. And as to the length of the conflict, for some reason, the East felt this was going to, it was just Eastern and Enugu and Lagos, but it's not. And the analyses were coming in from London. There were people in Chatham House looking at things and advising accordingly. So we were up against obstacles and challenges we never really fathomed completely.
But it was war. You needed a big power to be by your side. Whether communism or capitalism should not matter at that point. You just needed the arms, you needed the support to survive. That should have been the ultimate goal. Don't you think so?
Indeed. But I think the leadership felt they had options they could choose who not to patronize. Yeah, sadly, but I really don't know how it could have gone. I don't have the details. I don't have primary access to primary sources on the discussion with the Soviet Union.
Because
quite clearly, they didn't quite. The conversation didn't go well. And it did upset some people. Sadly, Philip Alale for one.
Because the Soviet Union would later embrace Nigeria. Nigeria would later embrace the same Soviet Union. In this case, communism did not matter.
Indeed, that at face value, that was kind of a strange. You'd say these are Britain and the Soviet Union on the same side of a conflict. But then the point was this: as I got to find out later, Britain was claiming it was not supplying lethal weapons to the federal side. That was a claim it was making. But that was not correct. Now, they had the Soviet Union, in that claim, they had the Soviet Union to hide behind. They say, well, if Nigeria got lethal weapons, they were getting them from the Soviet Union, not from Britain. But that was true. Britain was giving them everything, was giving the federal side everything it needed. The Soviet Union was sending aircraft and MiG jets and arranging for them to get pilots as well. So it's a complex chemistry what was going on. You remember in February. Dr. Nkrumah was overthrown. Nkrumah was very, very close to the Soviet Union. In February 1996, he was overthrown, and the Soviet Union lost its foothold on the west coast of Africa. So it was willing to do anything to regain a standing of sorts in that part of the world, and that was it. So they tried Biafra, and when it didn't work out, they accepted whatever Nigeria offered.
It seems Biafra at the time was standing alone, even within the Organization of African Unity, OAU. Biafra could not convince that organization. So in most of the negotiations, nothing came out of the negotiations. How would you explain that?
I think it's easy to explain. Like we mentioned earlier, just about all the countries on the African continent have the same kind of ethnic problems, ethnic heterogeneity as Nigeria, and potentially could erupt in it was easy to do mischief of that kind of a country like Britain, to create problems for any country that did not follow along with its requests or recommendations on any issue. All had that weakness. So you couldn't, I mean, you have to give it to Mwalimu Nyerere and Kaunda and Bwanyi for going as far as they did. It is extremely difficult, extremely for anybody to be openly supportive of the East and Biafra at the time, because it wouldn't take too much to stoke problem in your own country if you stoke a problem in your own country if you didn't see things the way Britain did. So that was the case with all of Africa at the time. The OAU had in its charter. The colonial boundaries were sacrosanct, more or less. The colonial boundaries were sacrosanct. Their silly argument being that if you tampered with one, then you're total unraveling. The whole continent would have to be reconfigured. Well, that being the case, they did what they did. And unfortunately, other organizations began to look also, well, this problem is in Africa, so why don't we let the Organization of African Unity to take the lead, and then we get behind them. At least the United Nations under UTHANT did. They say, well, we'll see what the OAU is doing, and then we will support them. And that was very bad. The OAU did not get it right at all. They missed the point, and unfortunately, there's an explanation for it.
You said the British did not like the Igbo. During the process of colonizing Nigeria, they had it easier with the North and the West. They could treat with the emirs and obas with assurance that their subjects would all fall in line. In Igbo land, it was different. They had to physically subjugate the people everywhere they went, and that was very hard work. Then in 1929, women took them on in Owerri and Calabar provinces. So from the word go, Igbos should have known that Britain didn't like them. Is that the point you were making here?
Yes, absolutely. And that's pretty obvious. And we blame them for that. Well, you can't blame them. They want to do what's convenient for them. They want to do what works for them. It was headache. It was headache pacifying the East, especially Igbo land. It was headache, big headache. How you going to have to personally convince every adult about whatever it is you wanted to do? Which was what you had to come to every village square. The white man has to come to every village square and talk to people and convince them. That was a requirement, but it just couldn't happen that way. Also, they tried to impose warrant chiefs. They had warrant chiefs, and of course, we were no use for them. So it is extremely difficult. They knew, they got to know we didn't take well to them, and they didn't take well to us.
While other elites in Western Nigeria, and to a much lesser extent, you said here, the North, who went to Britain for higher education, most of those of the East traveled to the United States. And you mentioned names like Eyo Ita, Benjamin Azikiwe, Mbonu Ojike, Kingsley Mbadiwe, Nwafo Rizu, Okechukwu Ikejani. They went to the United States instead of Britain. So can we say that Igbos, they also like Britain?
State Affairs with Nnodim is live.
Professor Joseph Nnodim is still on State Affairs. So the line is still open. Respond to the point he's making. The Biafran War. Do you have your own perspective? A perspective different from his? So you can call on WhatsApp on 080 999 18449. Remember, restrict your subject, your comment, to the subject we are discussing tonight. It is the Biafran War. But if you can also connect it to contemporary issues relating to the core, the ball is in your court. So the WhatsApp number is 080 18449. Nigeria's code is +234. 234, that's the national code. But the number to call on WhatsApp is 080 999 18449. We are discussing the book Toward Understanding the Nigeria-Biafra War and the Lingering Questions. It's a 288-page book written by Joseph Ogbonna Nnodim. He is a native of Owerri, Imo State of Nigeria. He was born in Aba, and his early education in that city. After medical school in Lagos, he pursued doctoral studies in the United Kingdom and also received certification in Switzerland. For over a decade, Nnodim was on the faculty of the medical school at Benin City. In the mid-90s, he expatriated to the United States of America to take up a position at the University of Michigan. He is a fellow of the American College of Physicians and the American Geriatric Society. Nnodim and his wife live in the outskirts of Ann in Michigan. I recommend his book to you, Towards Understanding the Nigeria-Biafra War and Lingering Questions, an Igbo perspective. Nnodim has raised fundamental points so far. We have looked at the role of Awolowo in the war. We've talked about hunger as a weapon of war. The Soviet Union approach to Biafra. What happened? We have mentioned the Organization of African Unity, OAU, and British support for Nigeria. Biafra got support from Côte d'Ivoire. Tanzania got recognition from Haiti. Gabon got some support from France. Is it true that Britain had or still has soft spot for the North? What was the role of the United States in the war? How interested are you in the subject of the war? I had a 4-hour interview with Professor Nnodim. We had the interview twice. But on this edition of State Affairs that we have tagged Part 1, the Part 1 is the first 2 hours of the interview. We will announce when we are going to run the Part 2. But this program runs every Sunday night, 9 p.m. West African time, every Sunday night. And the Igbo question is critical to the reason we are running this show. The understanding of the question. I've been reading Yakubu Gowon's book. I'll start the review of the book soon. I'm still reading. And you can get Yakubu Gowon's book on udarabooks.com. Udara Books is our bookstore on history, politics, and power. At the moment, we have more than 40 titles on the war, the Biafran War. You can go on the store to order your copy. It is udarabooks.com. You can also order through the WhatsApp number that we are using for this broadcast. Have you read Alabi Summer's story? Have you read the story of Adewale Ademoyega in Why We Struck? Have you read Achike Odenwa's account of the Nigerian Civil War? Alexander Madiebo wrote on the war. Have you read it? Are you a student of the war? Have you read the book, The Untold Story of the Nigeria-Biafra War by Dr. Chus Aneke? I recommend that book to you. You'll find books on the war on udarabooks.com. Reading is feeding the mind. To read is to energize the body. Taking in knowledge refreshes the brain. The knowledge of the Nigerian Civil War is the Igbo question. In the Igbo question, there is the Yoruba question. There's the Fulani question, the Hausa question, and there is the Nigerian question. Are the Igbo playing at the periphery of Nigerian politics? What do they want? Do they want Biafra? Nigeria said you can't get Biafra. Are they going to make the argument that on Aburi they stand? Do they want referendum? How will they get it? Are Igbo interested in the presidency in 2027? Why can't they get it? Let's listen to the concluding part of the Nnodim interview, the concluding part of the part 1. This program runs on Sundays, 9 p.m. West African time, Tuesdays, 9 p.m. West African time, Thursday, 9 p.m. West African time, Sunday, 9 p.m., Tuesday, 9 p.m., Thursday, 9 p.m., all West African time. Professor Joseph Nnodim is on State Affairs.
State Affairs with Nnodim is live.
The Igbos should have seen the war coming. Remember, Awolowo and Ahmadu Bello at some point wanted a secession clause in the constitution. Azikiwe was not for it. And some are asking, what was Azikiwe thinking at that time?
Well, for an idealist who was aspiring towards constructing this huge edifice of a nation, you'll forgive him for thinking in those terms. But it was, events were to prove him wrong. Right was to put paid to northern domination of political life in the country, and at the General 15 coup, I don't think that was the case. You'll recall the broadcast Patrick Nzogu made, in which he indicted it was all about the politicians who demanded 10%. And it was about crooked politicians and the rest of them. It wasn't so much people from a certain part of the country. So it's difficult to say the coup was aimed at a certain ethnic realignment. I don't think so. I really don't think so. And I was looking at some other account of what might have happened. Actually, at Colonel Njoku's send-off, the send-off ceremony for Colonel Njoku, he was going to leave for Nigeria Military Training College. At his send-off, General Mamalari had gotten drunk. He said that there was going to be a coup, that they were actually recruiting for a coup. And that was going to be a coup of on behalf of a military coup, on behalf of the candidate, Nigeria National Alliance. So that was going to happen. And apparently it was preempted by the January 15th coup. The January 15th coup, I don't think was not, there was no indication that it was political. It was geared towards the political interest of a certain group or the political disadvantage of a certain ethnic group. I don't think, or region of the country. I think they castigated all corrupt politicians who demand 10% and so on and so forth.
Some writers have said that they went for the conservative political element. Ahmadu Bello, Tafawa Balewa, Samuel Ladoke, Akintola. No person from the Awolowo faction was touched in Western Nigeria. None in Eastern Nigeria. And therefore, it was an Igbo coup.
I disagree. I disagree. Other than and those people like them, I'll leave it to those the people who the principles to say whether or not they planned it as it was an Igbo coup. From what I can see from the evidence, I don't think it is an Igbo coup. What my reading revealed, they had discussed bloodiness or non-bloodiness, and they said, well, they were going to leave it to the situation. If the situation was such that the politician or whoever it was, the target was going to be apprehended without shedding blood, then go ahead and apprehend without shedding blood. But then if the situation was such that shooting was happening or was going to happen, well, so be it. By the time they got to Akintola's place, Akintola had heard from the deputy premier's wife, Mrs. Fanny Kayode. She had called to tell him that because Captain Mobosi came and arrested Remi Fanny Kayode first. He did not resist, so they didn't shoot him. They just picked him up and took him away. His wife called Chief Akintola. And by the time when they got there, it was right, started blazing away. So there was a firefight and I was killed. In Kaduna, they had to shoot their way in into the Savannah's place, and it got very messy. In the east, you remember Archbishop Makari also was visiting, so they had to deal him and Dr. Para until he left. If Para had resisted, they probably would have shot him. So I think that was the case. That was the case. And frankly, I've tried to find where a clear statement was made that Sir Balewa was shot, and I've not found one. I've not found one where it was clearly said that he was shot and killed. So it's sad. It's sad. I mean, I went at length to give my thoughts on coups and things of that kind. Yeah, when you use a kitchen, a cookery metaphor. Well, yeah, when you want to make an omelette, you break eggs, but for goodness sake, ask yourself, what is the omelette going to taste like? You break eggs, you make your omelets, and then you're going to eat the omelets. What are the omelets going to taste like? So I'll leave it there. But I'm totally not convinced that the Igbo set out to execute a coup. If they had, from all the evidence, it would have succeeded. It would have succeeded because they were all over the place. They had all the means. They said they were terribly incompetent. And that's not the case. They would have succeeded. So it was definitely not a coup. And people who were killed, the situation was such that, very sadly, it got violent, shooting, and it happened the way it did.
Before we round off this interview, I just want us to look at the role of the United States in that war. Azikiwe schooled in the US, Mbonu Ojike, Kingsley Mbadiwe, Nwafo Rizu, and others. How come they could not influence the United States to back Biafra?
Question is, were they asked to? The big one big point I make that we did not quite use the East did not use its civilian talent, civilian political talent fully. When it did, it was almost half-hearted. That's one part. So a determined effort was not made. You'll recall the Nixon administration that came, this administration that came in 1969 was, some of the notes, some of Henry Kissinger's writings are a lot more sympathetic. They were sympathetic to Biafra. But definitely the Johnson administration was totally immersed in what was going on in Vietnam. They couldn't be bothered. They just couldn't be bothered. He had no time. He had no time for work. He just left it to, said, well, it was British sphere of influence. It was an African thing. And he didn't want to have anything to do with it. Things weren't going terribly well in Vietnam for him. So he did not want to be bothered with. So, but to the extent that we got across to the American in the street, they were extremely supportive of Biafra. Many of them were extremely supportive. That's in the non-organized. It's a different story. We might talk about that at some point. What the response of the United States was to what was going on in Nigeria and Africa as well at the time. About 50%, over 50% of the relief effort was sponsored by the ordinary American. So they were very, very, very supportive of what was, the plight of Biafrans. Unfortunately, at the governmental level, it was different. It was totally different.
Biafra, at the end of the day, got diplomatic recognition from Gabon, Tanzania, Cote d'Ivoire, and Zambia. Was that not a good one?
It was. That was something. I have nothing but admiration for those leaders who looked past the kinds of comments coming from the Commonwealth of Nations and the OAU, and then saw the issues for what they were. Mwalimu Nyerere, Omabongo, Kinekaunda, Mfebwai, and then Francois Duvalier-Haïti. These are people that looked past all of those reservations and thought there was something here. the point I make is that about sovereignty is that you have to be able to defend it. If you're not able to defend it, then there's a problem. Or do you deserve it? It's a question. That was a question we didn't fully address, and like I say, I called for some flexibility, and I wrote somewhere that Habib Bourguiba of Tunisia tried to hint at something we could do, but then it was cut short by Mr. Francis Mukedi, which is very unfortunate. It's wonderful to ask for a whole loaf of bread and get all of it. But then if you can't get the whole loaf and got half of it, that is something, because you can then put half in your pocket and come back and ask for the other half. But that's another discussion for another day.
But Nwokedi made the point that these had been discussed during the Aburi conference, and Nigeria did not keep to the terms of the accord.
Indeed. You see, in a just world, for want of a better way to express it, where everybody looked at things and they saw them for what they were. That's a very, very strong argument to make. But you have to, well, you're facing a realistic world where right and wrong are open to definition and redefinition. Yes, they had been discussed at Aburi, and General Gowon showed very, very, very bad faith. He and his advisors, they jettisoned very well-reasoned agreements that were reached. But then, the reality is that they could do it. They could do it and get away with it. So what are you going to do about it? What would I have done about it? What would I have done about it is, well, say, fine, that's the situation. Talk about some other way, not be too hidebound about the sovereignty issue. That would have been on the table itself as well. We would have put it on the table itself. We would agree to put it on it and then talk about it. That would have been a lot more rewarding than saying, well, it's totally off of the, out of consideration.
Why is this story important to the young generation?
Good question. It's very important because I think it explains everything about Nigeria. That was a time Nigeria lost its innocence and has not made any effort whatsoever to regain it. The enormity of what was done is glossed over just because the outcome was what it was, the federal side won. If you look at certain websites of atrocities, historical atrocities, the death of over 1 million children just comes below that of the Holocaust. Won't believe it. The death of over 1 million children through starvation between 1967 and 1970 is ranked just below the Holocaust of 1939 to 1945 in Europe. So that is something our country has not addressed. It has refused to confront. They take this head in the sand attitude, or at best, they take what I call a saltatory approach to our history. When we get to 1966, we jump to 1972. Nobody wants to talk about between 66, 67, 69. So young people should see that it set the stage for everything else that has happened. It set the stage for everything else that has happened. And they are well advised to get a good sense for what happened, know it very well, know the facts very well. And because it's the facts of that past that have shaped the present. And the present is obviously, the future is, the present will shape the future. So it's in their interest, it's certainly in their interest to know exactly what's happened. We do them a disservice. We do them a very, very serious disservice, excluding a thorough study of what happened between 66 and 1970, exactly the way it happened, excluding it from their school curricula and from the general discussion in the country. A terrible thing happened. A very, very terrible thing happened. You cannot starve 1 million children by true policy. I mean, it's spoken. It's not implied. It's spoken. It's not spoken. It's the federal side said they were going to use starvation as a weapon of war. Actually did, and the result was the death of over 1 million children. That is sad. That is very, very, very sad. And that's the worst calamity in recorded history on the African continent. I thought that was the very first time, casualties exceeded the great famine threshold of 100,000. And this was in a civil conflict situation, not a colonial conflict or a civil conflict situation. So a terrible thing happened. And I think Mr. Alison Aida is dead. Chief Obafemi Awolowo is dead. Chief Enahoro is dead. Only Jiragawan is alive now. I think he should do something for the country. He should do something for the country in this regard and say very publicly that he is sorry for what happened. I don't care. I mean, all adults can fight. They can fight and kill themselves. But 1 million children, for goodness sake. I mean, the whole literature on starvation and people like, the usual trope. General Duke was offered a land corridor. That is fairly standard rubbish. You know, it's a specious argument. A specious argument used in this kind of a situation. The point is that there's a deliberate policy to use starvation as a weapon of war. And there has been full knowledge that armed people do not starve in war. It never happened. It's never happened in history. In all of military history, it's never happened. So when you utilize starvation as a weapon, you are targeting children, the infirm, women, and the old. So the young people should be very, very careful about this. Go get properly educated on what happened in their country, know exactly what happened. And the older generation, those who were the principal, they're all passing away now, unfortunately, but those who are there should take the proper attitude, bring the proper attitude, discussions of this, and not just dismiss them. General Obasanjo tried during his presidency to hold a semblance of a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. But then that went very badly. People came and got really funny. They probably didn't understand the spirit of that exercise. They came there still talking rubbish about how they were doing their duty and how they were. You don't kill 1 million children and you were doing your duty. That's a crime against humanity. You don't kill 1 million people, 1 million babies cannot die and you claim you're doing your duty. You're not doing any duty. That's a crime against humanity. It's as bad as that. The fighting, the shooting war, that's something else. That is what happened to babies. That's what I'm terribly concerned about. That's what I'm very, very, very terribly concerned about. And the remorse should be shown for that. A massive scale, a very, very grand scale. The country should be very, very sorry for what happened.
Professor Joseph Nnodim, thank you for writing this book towards understanding the Nigeria-Biafra war and lingering questions and Igbo perspective.
Thank you too, Mr. Below, for the very great work you've been doing, reviewing works by authors on diverse topics. I'm very glad we were able to do this, and thank you, and all best wishes to your listeners.
State Affairs with Nnodim is live.
So we've come to the end of part 1 of our interview with Joseph Nnodim, the author of the book Towards Understanding the Nigeria-Biafra War and Lingering Questions on Igbo Perspective. Yes, you still have some time to make your contribution. You can call in. We can take one call before we go. If not, we are good to go. So the WhatsApp number to call is 080-349-18449. You want to respond to some of the points the author has raised in his book. Yakubu Gowon's autobiography is entitled My Life of Duty and Allegiance by Yakubu Gowon. All right, let's take this call. Hello.
Hello, Mazio below.
I greet you.
Yes, thank you very much for taking my call once more. My name is Ochuko, okay? I'm calling from somewhere. Okay, so quickly, I was trying to make the point earlier on, okay? With regards to the declaration by Isaac Adakabo, okay? The reason why it's important is because oftentimes when you hear people speak about the 1967 to 1970 Nigerian-Biafran war and what they normally want to say about the essence of the current agitation, they try to bring that declaration by Adakabo as a precedent, okay? So I just want to put on record, all right, that myself as an Orobo person, as an Orobo man, for example, the Niger Delta Republic, so-called, that Adakabo declared, was actually essentially an Igbo only enterprise, right? The Niger Delta Republic that Adakaburu declared had nothing to do with nationality that are part of that region. So today, for example, when people present the Niger Delta as if there was actually such an entity that was declared by Adakaburu, it then becomes a sort of a misinformation. And I think that point should be made very, very clearly. And that's why I felt like making that point, okay? And then secondly, the next thing I want to say, Professor Joseph Nnodim, I think he also, you asked him about, he was talking about the fact that what General Ojukwu probably lacked in his time was maybe lack of maybe adequate advisors. I don't know, but he mentioned about economic advisors. But I think that one major problem that generation had was maybe they overlooked the geopolitics of the events that were happening that time. Okay, and perhaps the sympathy towards the West also played a role, and maybe it also blindsided that generation that they underrated the real mass intention of the Western imperialists, and so they didn't feel the urge to look it, and therefore the offer by the Russians or the Soviets at that time was not looked towards favorably. But hopefully, in our generation, we can do better, and I trust that we will do better in our own time. So thank you very much. Let me not take too much time like I have to advise. I will leave it there, Mazi. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for making your point. The line is still open. We can take one more call before we end the show today. Did you listen to the Professor Joseph Nnodim's interview towards understanding the Nigeria-Biafra war and lingering questions, an Igbo perspective? So we can take one more call before we go. Part 2 of the interview will also be played on State Affairs. We'll let you know when that will be on. Do not forget to join me on Tuesday, 9 p.m. West African time for another edition of State Affairs. I will also be back on Thursday, 9 p.m. But remember, on Saturday, 8 a.m. West African time, we are still streaming on these platforms, and we'll also be streaming on Instagram and LinkedIn on Saturday. For now, we are just streaming on Facebook, YouTube, and X. But by Saturday, we'll be streaming on LinkedIn and Instagram. We have special editions on TikTok. Special editions that come up on TikTok. Thank you for being part of today's stream. We'll be back again on Tuesday, 9 p.m. West African time.